Welcome back, my dear people. Welcome to another story here on the channel. Tonight, we're going to take a break from the outside world. Lay down, close your eyes, and let's go back to a time when time passed more slowly. While you're getting comfortable, please subscribe and comment below where you're watching and what time it is there. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through the centuries, past the familiar rhythms of our modern world, past the gentle glow of electric lights and the soft hum of technology. Tonight, we journey to a time when attraction was measured not by a warm smile or kind words, but by the stark calculus of power, utility, and social dominance. Imagine yourself stepping into the streets of ancient Rome, where the very concept of what made someone desirable would seem strange and almost alien to our contemporary sensibilities. Here, in this bustling metropolis of marble and ambition, seduction was not an art of romance, but a carefully orchestrated display of status, control, and strategic advantage. The Romans understood attraction as a language of power spoken through whitened teeth, carefully groomed bodies, and the subtle signs of wealth and position. In this world, beauty was secondary to dominance. Charm was less important than capability. And the most alluring quality one could possess was not physical perfection, but the ability to command respect and resources. Tonight, we'll explore this fascinating and sometimes unsettling landscape of Roman desire, where even the most intimate connections were shaped by the relentless pursuit of social advancement. Let the weight of the day slip away as we discover together what it truly meant to be attractive in the eternal city, where love and power were so intertwined that one could scarcely exist without the other. Rest now, and let these ancient stories of ambition and allure carry you gently toward sleep. You wake before dawn in your modest Roman dwelling, the pre-dawn air carrying the mingled scents of olive oil lamps and the distant aroma of bread baking in neighborhood ovens. The first task of your day, before even breaking your fast, is the meticulous ritual of making yourself presentable, not merely clean, but strategically attractive in the particular way that Roman society demands. The morning light filters through the small window as you reach for your strigil, the curved bronze scraper that will remove yesterday's accumulated grime and oil from your skin. But this is no simple washing. This is the beginning of a complex performance of desirability that will continue throughout your day. You understand, as every Roman does, that attraction is not something that happens naturally. It is something that must be carefully constructed, maintained, and displayed. Your first concern is your teeth. You mix together a paste of crushed oyster shells, charcoal, and honey, working it carefully around your mouth with a small bronze pick. White teeth are not merely a sign of health in Roman society. They are a symbol of wealth, discipline, and the kind of meticulous self-care that marks you as someone worthy of attention and respect. The poor have yellowed, broken teeth from coarse bread and limited access to cleaning materials. Your gleaming smile announces to the world that you have both the resources and the self-control to maintain yourself properly. As you clean your teeth, you catch sight of your reflection in a polished bronze mirror propped against the wall. The Romans have taught you to see yourself not as a single entity, but as a collection of strategic advantages and disadvantages that must be carefully managed. Your hair, your skin, your posture, each element must contribute to the overall impression of competence and desirability that will determine your success in the complex social negotiations that fill every Roman day. You turn your attention to your body hair, reaching for the bronze tweezers that will remove every unwanted strand. For both men and women, a properly groomed body is one that shows evidence of careful attention to detail. The wealthy employ skilled slaves to pluck and trim with precision, but even those of modest means understand that attraction in Rome is about demonstrating your ability to control and perfect your physical presentation. Hair in the wrong places suggests a lack of discipline, a surrender to natural impulses that marks you as someone who cannot be trusted with more important responsibilities. Process is methodical and time-consuming. You work carefully around your groin, your underarms, your legs, removing the evidence of your body's natural processes. This is not about achieving some idealized version of beauty. It is about showing that you have the resources, the patience, and the dedication necessary to transform yourself according to social expectations. Every removed hair is a small victory over the chaos of the natural world, a demonstration that you are someone who can impose order and control on your environment. As you work, you can hear the sounds of the city beginning to stir around you. The rhythmic tapping of a shoemaker's hammer, the distant calls of merchants beginning to set up their stalls, the soft padding of feet on stone as slaves hurry about their morning tasks. Rome is waking up, and with it, the endless dance of attraction and seduction that shapes every social interaction in this vast urban experiment. You apply a thin layer of olive oil to your skin, working it in with practiced movements that have become as automatic as breathing. The oil serves multiple purposes. It protects your skin from the harsh Mediterranean sun. It gives you a subtle gleam that suggests health and vitality, and it carries the faint scent of the expensive pressed olives that mark you as someone of at least modest prosperity. Poor Romans smell of sweat and cheap oil. Your carefully chosen scent announces your social position before you speak a word. The morning grooming ritual continues with your hair, which requires careful attention to achieve the precise effect demanded by current Roman fashion. You work a mixture of bear grease and crushed rose petals through your locks, shaping them into the elaborate styles that communicate your awareness of contemporary trends. Your hair is not simply clean, it is a statement of your cultural sophistication, your attention to detail, and your understanding of what makes someone desirable in Roman society. But perhaps the most important element of your morning preparation is the way you train your body to move through space. You practice walking with the measured, confident gait that Romans associate with authority and attractiveness. Your posture must be erect, but not rigid. Your movements deliberate, but not forced. The way you carry yourself will communicate more about your desirability than any individual physical feature ever could. This is because Romans understand attraction as fundamentally about power and capability rather than mere physical beauty. A person who moves with confidence and purpose, who demonstrates through their every gesture that they are someone who can navigate the complex social hierarchies of Roman life, is infinitely more attractive than someone who is merely pleasant to look at. Beauty fades, but competence and social skill create lasting attraction. As you prepare yourself for the day ahead, you rehearse the subtle signals that will communicate your availability and interest to potential partners. The way you hold your shoulders, the manner in which you make eye contact, the precise angle at which you tilt your head during conversation. These are the tools of Roman seduction, far more important than any natural charm or physical perfection. You understand that in Roman society, attraction is not something that happens spontaneously between individuals who find each other appealing. It is a carefully orchestrated performance in which each participant plays their role according to well-established rules and expectations. The most attractive Romans are those who understand these rules most thoroughly and execute them with the greatest skill and precision. Your morning preparation concludes with a final check of your appearance in the bronze mirror. You are not looking for beauty in the modern sense. You are looking for the specific combination of grooming, posture, and presentation that will mark you as someone worthy of attention and respect in Roman society. Satisfied with your appearance, you step out into the bustling streets of Rome, ready to participate in the complex social dance that will determine your romantic and sexual success. The morning air is crisp and filled with the sounds and smells of a city coming to life. As you walk through the narrow streets, you are acutely aware of how you are being perceived by those around you. Every person you encounter is making rapid assessments of your attractiveness based not on your individual charm or personality, but on the visible markers of your social status, your grooming habits, and your ability to present yourself according to Roman standards. This is the world of Roman attraction, a world where desire is inseparable from power, where seduction is a form of strategic thinking, and where the most alluring quality one can possess is not beauty, but the ability to demonstrate competence, control, and social awareness. As you navigate the crowded streets of the eternal city, you carry with you the knowledge that attraction is not something you simply have. It is something you must continuously create, maintain, and perform. The streets of Rome pulse with the energy of 1,000,000 inhabitants, each one engaged in the subtle art of presenting themselves as desirable and worthy of attention. As you move through the crowded thoroughfares, you become acutely aware of how attraction operates as a public performance, played out in the marketplaces, bathhouses, and social gatherings that form the backbone of Roman urban life. Your first destination is the local taberna, where the morning crowd gathers to break their fast and conduct the informal business that keeps Roman society functioning. Here, attraction is not about stolen glances or whispered sweet words. It is about demonstrating your ability to navigate complex social hierarchies with skill and confidence. The most attractive person in the room is not necessarily the most physically beautiful, but the one who commands respect through their bearing, their connections, and their obvious competence in the intricate dance of Roman social interaction. You observe a wealthy merchant's wife as she enters the establishment, her presence immediately transforming the atmosphere of the room. Her attraction lies not in her individual features, though she is certainly well-groomed and expensively dressed, but in the aura of capability and authority that surrounds her like a perfume. She moves with the confidence of someone who knows exactly how much she is worth and expects others to recognize that worth immediately. Her servants trail behind her at precisely the correct distance, their own carefully maintained appearance reflecting favorably on her ability to manage her household effectively. The merchant's wife's hair is arranged in the latest fashion, a complex construction that required hours of skilled labor to achieve. But the true message of her hairstyle is not about beauty. It is about having the resources to command such elaborate attention to detail. Her jewelry is substantial but tasteful, each piece chosen to communicate her family's prosperity without appearing vulgar or ostentatious. Her clothing fits perfectly, the fabric of the finest quality, the colors rich and vibrant in a way that announces her access to expensive dyes and skilled tailors. As she speaks with the taberna owner, you notice how her voice carries the particular cadence of educated Roman speech, each word precisely pronounced and strategically chosen. Her conversation is not idle chatter, but a carefully orchestrated display of her knowledge, her connections, and her understanding of the commercial and social networks that bind Roman society together. She mentions her husband's latest business ventures, drops the names of influential friends, and demonstrates her familiarity with current political developments. This is seduction Roman style, the art of making oneself irresistible through competence and social sophistication. You turn your attention to a group of young men gathered around a table near the window, their conversation animated and competitive. Here, too, attraction is being performed according to distinctly Roman rules. The most magnetic among them is not the most handsome, but the one who demonstrates the greatest skill in verbal sparring, the most comprehensive knowledge of current events, and the most impressive connections to powerful patrons. His friends defer to him not because of his physical appearance, but because he has mastered the art of presenting himself as someone whose attention and approval are valuable commodities. This young man's tunic is of fine wool, well fitted and recently cleaned, but what makes him truly attractive is the way he wears it with the casual confidence of someone who takes his prosperity for granted. His hair is perfectly groomed, his beard trimmed to the fashionable length, his nails clean and well maintained. But beyond these surface details, he radiates the kind of self-assurance that comes from knowing exactly where he stands in the complex hierarchy of Roman society and feeling secure in that position. As you listen to his conversation, you realize that he is not simply talking, he is performing a carefully choreographed display of his desirability. He mentions his recent success in a legal case, casually references his family's connections to several senators, and demonstrates his familiarity with the latest philosophical debates that are capturing the attention of educated Romans. Each statement is designed to enhance his reputation and increase his attractiveness to potential romantic partners who might be listening. As the conversation turns to the gladiatorial games scheduled for the following week, and you observe how the discussion becomes a subtle competition among the young men to demonstrate their sophistication and insider knowledge. They debate the merits of different fighters, share information about which wealthy patrons are sponsoring which contests, and display their understanding of the complex social dynamics that surround these popular entertainments. The most attractive among them is not the one who shouts the loudest or expresses the most extreme opinions, but the one who demonstrates the most nuanced understanding of how these public spectacles function as expressions of Roman power and social organization. Leaving the taberna, you make your way to the public baths, where the performance of attraction takes on even more complex dimensions. Here, in the steamy atmosphere of the caldarium and the cooler spaces of the tepidarium, Romans engage in the elaborate rituals of cleansing and social networking that are essential to maintaining one's position in society. The baths are not simply places to wash. They are theaters of seduction where every gesture, every conversation, every display of the body is carefully calculated to enhance one's attractiveness and social standing. The wealthy Romans who frequent these baths have access to the services of skilled slaves who scrub their skin until it gleams, massage their muscles with expensive oils, and ensure that every aspect of their physical presentation meets the exacting standards of Roman society. But even more important than these grooming services is the opportunity the baths provide for social interaction and the subtle negotiations that determine romantic and sexual partnerships. You observe a middle-aged senator as he holds court in the tepidarium, surrounded by a group of younger men who hang on his every word. His attractiveness lies not in his physical appearance. He is balding, his body soft from years of comfortable living, but in his obvious power and influence. The younger men compete for his attention, each trying to demonstrate their own worthiness through displays of wit, knowledge, and social connection. The senator's desirability is a function of his ability to advance careers, provide introductions to influential people, and offer access to the networks of power that determine success in Roman society. As you soak in the warm water, you notice how the conversations around you are filled with the subtle codes and signals that govern Roman approaches to attraction and seduction. A wealthy matron discusses her plans for an upcoming dinner party, casually mentioning the prominent guests who will be attending. Her words are ostensibly about social planning, but their real purpose is to demonstrate her own attractiveness as a hostess and social connector. The men who listen to her are not simply being polite, they are calculating how association with her might advance their own social and romantic prospects. The atmosphere in the baths is charged with a particular kind of tension, not the straightforward sexual energy that might characterize similar gatherings in our modern world, but the more complex excitement that comes from participating in the elaborate social performances that determine one's place in Roman society. Every person present is simultaneously performer and audience, seducer and seduced, evaluator and evaluated. You notice how physical beauty, while not irrelevant, plays a distinctly secondary role in these interactions. The most attractive people in the room are not necessarily the most physically perfect. but those who demonstrate the greatest mastery of the social skills that Romans value most highly. They speak with authority, but not arrogance. They listen with attention, but not submission. They display their knowledge without appearing pedantic or show off. Their attractiveness is a function of their obvious competence in navigating the complex social world of Roman civilization. As afternoon approaches, you make your way to the Forum, where the business of the empire is conducted and where attraction takes on its most political dimensions. Here, surrounded by the marble columns and bronze statues that celebrate Roman power and achievement, you witness how seduction and governance intersect in ways that would seem strange and perhaps disturbing to modern sensibilities. The Forum is filled with men and women engaged in the serious business of legal proceedings, commercial negotiations, and political maneuvering. But underneath these official activities runs a constant current of attraction and seduction, as Romans use their personal magnetism to advance their professional and political goals. The most successful advocates are not simply skilled legal scholars, they are charismatic performers who understand how to use their personal attractiveness to influence judges, juries, and opposing counsel. You observe a young lawyer as he argues a case before a small crowd of interested spectators. His success depends not only on his legal knowledge and rhetorical skills, but on his ability to project the kind of personal authority and attractiveness that will make his arguments more persuasive. His toga is perfectly draped, his gestures are carefully controlled. His voice carries the measured cadence of educated Roman speech. But what makes him truly compelling is the sense of confidence and competence that radiates from his every movement and word. The afternoon sun beats down on the marble pavement as you watch the complex dance of attraction and power that plays. Out in every corner of the Forum, senators greet each other with carefully calibrated displays of respect and familiarity, their interactions governed by the subtle rules that determine who defers to whom and under what circumstances. Wealthy merchants conduct business with a kind of casual authority that comes from knowing that their financial resources make them attractive partners for both commercial and personal relationships. As the day progresses, you begin to understand that attraction in Roman society is not simply about individual charm or physical beauty. It is about demonstrating your ability to function effectively within the complex social, economic, and political systems that hold the empire together. The most attractive Romans are those who understand these systems most thoroughly and can navigate them with the greatest skill and confidence. The evening approaches, and with it, the informal social gatherings where Romans conduct the more intimate negotiations that determine romantic and sexual partnerships. But even these apparently private interactions are governed by the same principles that shape all Roman approaches to attraction. The understanding that desirability is fundamentally about power, competence, and the ability to advance one's position in the relentless competition that defines Roman social life. As you prepare to return to your dwelling, you carry with you a deeper understanding of how attraction operated in this ancient world, not as a spontaneous emotional response, but as a carefully calculated assessment of utility, capability, and social value. In Rome, to be attractive was to be useful, to be seductive was to be powerful, and to be desired was to be recognized as someone who could enhance the lives and prospects of those around them. As evening shadows begin to lengthen across the marble facades of Roman buildings, you find yourself invited to a private dinner party in the home of a prosperous merchant family. These intimate gatherings represent the culmination of the day's complex performances of attraction, where the subtle social negotiations that began in the morning's grooming rituals reach their most sophisticated and consequential expression. The merchant's villa is a testament to the family's understanding of how domestic space can be used to enhance attractiveness and social position. Every detail of the house's decoration and arrangement has been carefully chosen to communicate the owner's wealth, taste, and cultural sophistication. The walls are adorned with frescoes depicting mythological scenes that demonstrate the family's education and aesthetic sensibilities. The furniture is elegantly crafted but not ostentatious, striking the precise balance between luxury and restraint that marks truly successful Romans. As you enter the main dining room, you notice how the space has been arranged to facilitate the kind of social interaction that Romans understand as essential to the formation of romantic and sexual partnerships. The couches are positioned to encourage conversation while maintaining the appropriate hierarchical relationships between guests of different social standing. The lighting is soft and flattering, created by carefully placed oil lamps that cast a warm glow over the assembled company without being so bright as to reveal every imperfection in appearance or grooming. The host and hostess greet each guest with the kind of gracious attention that immediately establishes their attractiveness as social orchestrators. Their ability to bring together an interesting and compatible group of people, to provide excellent food and entertainment, and to manage the complex social dynamics that inevitably arise when Romans gather for pleasure, these skills mark them as highly desirable partners for both business and personal relationships. You observe how the hostess, in particular, demonstrates her attractiveness through her masterful management of the evening's social dynamics. She ensures that conversations flow smoothly, that no guest feels neglected or uncomfortable, and that the various social hierarchies represented in the room are respected without becoming rigid or oppressive. Her ability to navigate these complex interpersonal challenges while maintaining her own dignity and charm makes her irresistibly attractive to the men present, who recognize in her the kind of partner who could enhance their own social standing and domestic happiness. The meal itself becomes another stage for the performance of attraction, as guests demonstrate their sophistication through their knowledge of fine foods, their ability to engage in witty conversation, and their skill in the subtle art of Roman dining etiquette. The most attractive diners are not simply those who eat with the greatest appetite, but those who show the most refined appreciation for the culinary arts and the most graceful mastery of the complex social rules that govern Roman banquets. Notice a young woman who has caught the attention of several male guests, not through overt flirtation, but through her demonstration of the particular combination of intelligence, cultural knowledge, and social grace that Romans find most appealing in potential partners. She speaks knowledgeably about literature and philosophy, but without the pedantic tone that would mark her as inappropriately scholarly for a woman of her social position. She listens attentively to the men's conversations about politics and business, offering occasional insights that reveal her understanding of these masculine domains without challenging male authority in ways that would be considered unattractive. Her attractiveness lies in her ability to project the image of someone who would be an ideal Roman wife, intelligent enough to be a worthy companion, cultured enough to enhance her husband's social standing, and skilled enough in domestic management to create a harmonious and prosperous household. She demonstrates these qualities not through explicit statements about her capabilities, but through the subtle ways she participates in the evening's conversations and social interactions. As the evening progresses, you observe how the older guests begin to engage in the kind of informal matchmaking that plays a crucial role in Roman approaches to marriage and partnership. They discuss the various young people present, evaluating their attractiveness not primarily in terms of physical beauty or personal charm, but in terms of their family connections, financial prospects, and potential contribution to advantageous social and economic alliances. This process of evaluation and negotiation takes place through seemingly casual conversations about family histories, business relationships, and social connections. But underneath these apparently innocent discussions lies a sophisticated system of assessment that takes into account every aspect of a person's attractiveness as defined by Roman society: their wealth, their social position, their family's reputation, their personal skills and accomplishments. and their potential value as partners in the complex web of relationships that determine success in Roman civilization. You listen as an elderly senator discusses a young man's prospects with the youth's father, their conversation touching on his education, his military service, his business acumen, and his demonstrated ability to navigate the political and social challenges that face ambitious Romans. The senator's interest in the young man is not simply personal. He is evaluating him as a potential husband for his own daughter, weighing his attractiveness against the complex set of criteria that Roman families use to determine suitable marriages. The show conversation reveals how attraction in Roman society operates as a collective rather than purely individual phenomenon. Families, social networks, and patronage relationships all play crucial roles in determining who is considered attractive and who has access to the most desirable partners. The most individually charming or physically beautiful person may find themselves excluded from the most advantageous matches if they lack the social connections and family support that Roman society considers essential to true attractiveness. As the wine flows and the evening's entertainment begins, you witness how Romans use cultural performance as another means of demonstrating their attractiveness and social worthiness. A young man with a pleasant voice sings a popular song, his performance appreciated not simply for its musical quality, but for his demonstration of the kind of cultural sophistication that marks him as a desirable companion. A woman recites verses from a fashionable poet, her delivery showing both her education and her understanding of the literary tastes that currently define Roman cultural excellence. These performances are not simply artistic expressions, they are strategic displays of the cultural capital that Romans understand as essential to attractiveness and social success. The most appealing performers are those who demonstrate not just technical skill, but the kind of cultural knowledge and aesthetic sensitivity that mark them as worthy partners for educated and sophisticated Romans. The evening's entertainment also includes dancing, but even this apparently spontaneous activity is governed by the complex social rules that shape all Roman approaches to attraction and seduction. The most attractive dancers are not necessarily the most graceful or energetic, but those who demonstrate the greatest skill in using physical movement to communicate their social position, their cultural sophistication, and their understanding of the subtle protocols that govern Roman social interaction. You observe how the dancing becomes a kind of courtship ritual, with potential partners using their movements to signal interest, availability, and social compatibility. But even these apparently intimate interactions are shaped by the broader social context in which they take place, with families, patrons, and social networks all playing roles in determining which partnerships are encouraged and which are discouraged. As the evening draws toward its close, you notice how the atmosphere in the room has subtly shifted from the formal courtesy of the early hours to a more relaxed but still carefully controlled intimacy. The guests who have proven themselves most attractive through their demonstrations of wit, cultural knowledge, and social skill find themselves at the center of increasingly focused attention from potential partners and their families. The most successful participants in the evening's complex social negotiations are those who have managed to present themselves as attractive, according to Roman standards, while also gathering valuable information about the social and economic standing of other guests. They have used the evening's opportunities to enhance their own reputations, to strengthen existing social connections, and to explore the possibility of forming new alliances that could advance their personal and family interests. But perhaps, most importantly, they have demonstrated their mastery of the sophisticated social skills that Romans consider essential to attractiveness and success. They have shown that they understand how to navigate the complex hierarchies of Roman society, how to present themselves in ways that enhance their desirability, and how to participate in the subtle negotiations that determine romantic and sexual partnerships in this ancient world. as you prepare to leave the villa and return to your own dwelling. You carry with you a deeper understanding of how attraction operated in the intimate social spaces where Romans conducted their most important personal business. You have seen how every aspect of the evening, from the arrangement of the furniture to the selection of the entertainment, from the topics of conversation to the manner of serving the food, was designed to facilitate the kind of social interaction that Romans understood as essential to the formation of lasting and advantageous partnerships. In the year 08 CE, as autumn shadows lengthened across the marble terraces of Rome, a middle-aged poet named Publius Ovidius Naso received news that would transform him from celebrated literary figure to exiled outcast in a single imperial decree. Augustus Caesar, the man who had brought peace to the Roman world and established the moral foundations of the empire, had decided that Ovid's teachings on love and seduction posed too great a threat to the social order he had worked so carefully to construct. Ovid's story begins not with this dramatic exile, but decades earlier in the prosperous hill town of Sulmo, where a wealthy family recognized their son's intellectual gifts and sent him to Rome for the education that would prepare him for a career in law and politics. The young Ovid arrived in the capital during the reign of Augustus, when the emperor was actively promoting a return to traditional Roman values after the chaos and moral dissolution that had characterized the final decades of the Republic. Rome that welcomed young Ovid was a city in transition, where the old aristocratic families were learning to accommodate themselves to imperial power, and where new forms of social interaction were emerging to replace the political freedoms that had once defined Roman civic life. In this environment, the arts of love and seduction took on enhanced importance as alternative arenas for competition, achievement, and social advancement. Ovid understood from his earliest days in Rome that attraction and seduction were not simply matters of personal inclination or emotional attachment, but sophisticated social skills that could be learned, practiced, and perfected through careful observation and strategic thinking. He approached the subject of love with the same analytical rigor that other Romans applied to law, politics, or military strategy, treating romance as a complex game with rules that could be mastered and techniques that could be taught. His first major work on the subject, the Ars Amatoria, or Art of Love, presented itself as a practical manual for Romans seeking to enhance their attractiveness and improve their success in romantic relationships. But Ovid's approach to these subjects was revolutionary in ways that would ultimately prove dangerous to the imperial order that Augustus was trying to establish, where traditional Roman thinking about attraction emphasized duty, family honor, and the advancement of social and economic interests. Ovid focused on pleasure, personal satisfaction, and the sophisticated manipulation of desire for its own sake. He taught his readers to think of seduction not as a means to the end of advantageous marriage or useful social connection, but as an art form worthy of cultivation and refinement in its own right. The poet's approach to attraction was simultaneously more cynical and more playful than traditional Roman attitudes. He understood that desire could be manufactured through careful attention to presentation, timing, and psychological manipulation, but he also delighted in the game-like aspects of romantic pursuit that traditional Romans tended to view as mere preliminaries to more serious business. Ovid's teachings on physical attractiveness reflected his sophisticated understanding of how Romans actually experienced desire, rather than how they claimed to experience it in their public pronouncements about moral virtue and family duty. He advised his readers on grooming techniques that went far beyond the basic maintenance expected of respectable Romans, suggesting elaborate cosmetic treatments, carefully chosen perfumes, and strategic attention to dress and personal presentation that would enhance their appeal to potential partners. But perhaps most controversially, Ovid taught that attraction was fundamentally about deception, the artful creation of illusions that would make oneself appear more desirable than one actually was. He encouraged women to use cosmetics not simply to enhance their natural beauty, but to create entirely new versions of themselves that would be more appealing to male desire. He advised men to cultivate personas that would maximize their attractiveness to women, even if these personas bore little resemblance to their actual personalities, or circumstances dot this approach to attraction as performance and manipulation. Directly challenged the Augustan emphasis on authenticity, moral virtue, and the subordination of personal desire to family and state interests. Ovid was teaching Romans to think of themselves as actors in elaborate romantic dramas where the goal was not moral virtue or social advancement, but the sophisticated pleasure that came from successfully manipulating the desires of others. Poet's understanding of Roman society was acute enough to recognize that his readers were already engaging in exactly the kinds of romantic and sexual behavior he was describing. His innovation was simply to acknowledge these realities openly, and to provide practical advice for those who wanted to become more skillful at activities they were already pursuing. But this acknowledgement was precisely what made his work so threatening to the imperial order. Augustus had built his political authority partly on the claim that he was restoring traditional Roman moral values after the decadence and dissolution of the late Republic. His marriage laws penalized celibacy and adultery while rewarding legitimate reproduction, and his public propaganda consistently emphasized duty, sacrifice, and the subordination of personal desire to collective good. Ovid's celebration of seduction as an end in itself undermined these moral foundations of imperial authority. The poet's advice to women was particularly subversive in the context of Augustan moral legislation. While the emperor's laws sought to control female sexuality by restricting divorce, punishing adultery, and encouraging early marriage and frequent childbearing, Ovid taught women sophisticated techniques for managing their own romantic and sexual lives according to their personal preferences rather than family or state interests. He advised women on how to choose lovers based on their own desires rather than family arrangements, how to conduct affairs discreetly without damaging their reputations, and how to use their sexual attractiveness as a form of personal power that could be wielded for their own benefit rather than exclusively for the advancement of their husbands' or fathers' interests. Ovid's approach to male attraction was equally subversive, though in different ways. Traditional Roman masculine ideals emphasized military prowess, political achievement, and the kind of austere self-discipline that demonstrated fitness for leadership. Ovid taught men to cultivate sensitivity, emotional sophistication, and attention to aesthetic pleasures that traditional Roman culture associated with effeminacy and moral weakness. The poet encouraged his male readers to study women's preferences and desires with the same careful attention they might devote to military strategy or legal advocacy. He advised them to become skilled in conversation, poetry, music, and dance accomplishments that traditional Roman education largely ignored in favor of rhetoric, law, and military training. This feminization of male attractiveness was deeply threatening to traditional Roman gender roles and the social hierarchies they supported. Ovid was teaching men to succeed in romantic relationships by adopting qualities and behaviors that Roman culture traditionally coded as feminine, suggesting that the masculine virtues celebrated by Augustan propaganda were less important for personal happiness than sensitivity, aesthetic refinement, and emotional intelligence. The poet's most dangerous teaching, however, was his insistence that love and seduction were autonomous realms of human experience that operated according to their own rules rather than being subordinated to the political and social imperatives that governed other aspects of Roman life. He taught his readers to think of romantic relationships as private affairs that should be guided by personal preference and mutual pleasure rather than family duty or state policy. This privatization of love directly challenged the foundational assumptions of Roman social organization, which treated marriage and family formation as fundamentally public activities that should serve collective rather than individual interests. Ovid was encouraging Romans to prioritize their personal desires over their obligations to family, state, and social order, exactly the kind of thinking that Augustus saw as responsible for the political chaos and moral dissolution of the late Republic. The emperor's decision to exile Ovid was not simply a response to the poet's literary works, but recognition that those works represented a comprehensive challenge to the moral and social foundations of imperial authority. Ovid had created an alternative system of values that celebrated individual pleasure over collective duty, private desire over public virtue, and sophisticated self-indulgence over austere self-discipline. The poet's influence extended far beyond his immediate readership to shape the broader culture of imperial Rome in ways that made Augustus's moral restoration increasingly difficult to maintain. Young Romans who read Ovid's works learned to think of attraction and seduction as sophisticated arts worthy of serious study and careful cultivation, rather than as simple biological drives that should be controlled and channeled towards socially useful purposes. The morning light filtering through the windows of Roman villas across the empire carried with it more than just the promise of another day. It illuminated scrolls containing Ovid's revolutionary teachings that were quietly transforming how an entire generation understood the nature of desire, attraction, and human relationships. In bedrooms and private gardens, in the quiet corners of libraries, and the intimate spaces of women's quarters, Romans were discovering that love and seduction could be approached not as mysterious forces beyond human control, but as sophisticated arts that could be learned, practiced, and perfected through careful study and strategic application. Ovid's Ars Amatoria began with a premise that was both simple and revolutionary. That successful attraction was not a matter of luck, natural charm, or divine favor, but of skill, knowledge, and careful preparation. The poet approached romance with the same methodical rigor that Romans applied to military campaigns, legal arguments, or architectural projects, treating seduction as a complex undertaking that required planning, resources, and expertise to execute successfully. This systematic approach to love represented a fundamental departure from traditional Roman attitudes toward romantic relationships. Where earlier generations had understood attraction primarily in terms of family alliances, social advancement, and the fulfillment of civic duties, Ovid taught his readers to think of seduction as an autonomous activity with its own goals, methods, and standards of excellence. The poet's advice to men seeking to enhance their attractiveness began with detailed instructions on physical presentation that went far beyond the basic grooming expected of respectable Romans. He recommended specific exercises designed to improve posture and develop an athletic physique, but cautioned against the kind of excessive muscular development that would make a man appear more suited to manual labor than to the refined pursuits of educated society. Ovid understood that Roman women were attracted not to raw physical power, but to the kind of controlled strength that suggested both capability and refinement. He advised men to cultivate bodies that appeared naturally athletic rather than artificially enhanced, recommending swimming, riding, and walking as preferable to the more strenuous exercises favored by gladiators and soldiers. The poet's recommendations for male grooming were equally detailed and sophisticated. He advised careful attention to hair care, suggesting specific oils and treatments that would enhance natural texture and color without appearing artificial or ostentatious. He recommended particular approaches to beard trimming that would enhance facial features while maintaining the appearance of natural growth. He even provided advice on nail care, breath freshening, and the strategic use of perfumes to create subtle but distinctive personal scents that would be remembered by potential partners. But Ovid's most revolutionary advice concerned not physical appearance, but psychological and emotional preparation for romantic pursuit. He taught men to study women's preferences and behaviors with the same careful attention they might devote to understanding political opponents or business competitors. He encouraged detailed observation of female responses to different types of male behavior, systematic experimentation with various approaches to conversation and courtship, and continuous refinement of romantic techniques based on feedback and results. This analytical approach to seduction required men to develop emotional and psychological sophistication that traditional Roman masculine education largely ignored. Ovid taught his readers to become skilled at reading subtle social cues, managing complex emotional dynamics, and adapting their behavior to match the preferences and expectations of different types of women. The poet's advice to women was even more revolutionary, challenging fundamental assumptions about female roles and capabilities that had shaped Roman society for centuries. Where traditional Roman culture taught women to be passive recipients of male attention, choosing among suitors based on family guidance and social advantage, Ovid encouraged women to become active agents in their own romantic lives, using their attractiveness and social skills to pursue relationships that would provide personal satisfaction rather than simply family advancement. Ovid's instructions for female beauty enhancement were extraordinarily detailed, reflecting both his own sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities and his understanding of male psychological responses to female appearance. He provided specific recipes for cosmetics, detailed instructions for hairstyling, and comprehensive advice on dress and jewelry selection that would maximize a woman's appeal to potential lovers. The poet recommended that women study their own faces and bodies with the same careful attention that artists devoted to their subjects, identifying particular features that could be enhanced and others that might be minimized through strategic use of cosmetics and clothing. He encouraged experimentation with different styles and approaches to personal presentation, suggesting that women develop multiple romantic personas that could be deployed depending on the specific man they hope to attract. But perhaps most controversially, Ovid taught women to think of their sexuality as a form of personal power that could be strategically deployed for their own benefit rather than exclusively for the advancement of their family's interests. He provided detailed advice on sexual techniques designed to increase male attachment and dependency, encouraging women to become skilled lovers who could use physical pleasure as a means of maintaining control over their romantic relationships. This approach to female sexuality was profoundly threatening to traditional Roman social organization, which depended on strict control of women's reproductive and sexual behavior to maintain clear lines of inheritance and family authority. Ovid was teaching women to use their sexuality for their own purposes, rather than subordinating it entirely to family and social imperatives. The poet's most sophisticated insights concerned the psychological dynamics of attraction and the ways in which desire could be artificially created and maintained through careful manipulation of timing, availability, and emotional rewards. He taught both men and women to understand romantic relationships as complex psychological games in which success depended on maintaining optimal levels of interest and uncertainty in their partners. Ovid advised his readers to avoid appearing too eager or too available, suggesting that moderate scarcity increased desirability while excessive availability decreased it. He recommended strategic variations in attention and affection designed to create emotional dependency in partners, encouraging alternating periods of intense focus and calculated distance that would keep lovers constantly wondering about their standing in the whole relationship. These psychological insights reflected Ovid's sophisticated understanding of human nature and his recognition that attraction was fundamentally about power dynamics rather than simple emotional attachment. He taught his readers to think of romantic relationships as ongoing negotiations in which each partner sought to maximize their advantage, while maintaining sufficient interest to keep the other person engaged. The poet's advice on sexual technique was equally strategic and psychologically sophisticated. He encouraged both men and women to study their partner's responses carefully, developing sexual skills that would create dependency and attachment rather than simply providing momentary pleasure. He taught that sexual satisfaction was a powerful tool for maintaining romantic relationships, but that it had to be deployed strategically rather than indiscriminately to achieve maximum effect. Ovid's understanding of the social context of romantic relationships led him to provide detailed advice on conducting affairs discreetly without damaging one's reputation or social standing. He taught his readers sophisticated techniques for secret communication, clandestine meetings, and the management of multiple romantic relationships simultaneously, without creating conflicts that could expose their activities to public scrutiny. This advice reflected Ovid's recognition that Roman society officially disapproved of many of the romantic behaviors he was encouraging, while simultaneously creating social and cultural conditions that made such behaviors nearly inevitable. The poet was providing practical guidance for navigating the contradiction between official moral standards and actual behavioral norms that characterized imperial Roman society. The cultural impact of Ovid's teachings extended far beyond the immediate circle of his readers to influence broader patterns of Roman social interaction, family formation, and cultural expression. Young Romans who absorbed his lessons developed different expectations about romantic relationships, different approaches to marriage and family life, and different understandings of the relationship between personal desire and social obligation. This cultural transformation was particularly evident in the increasing sophistication of Roman approaches to courtship and marriage negotiation. Where earlier generations had treated romantic attachment as largely irrelevant to the serious business of family alliance and social advancement, Romans influenced by Ovid began to demand that marriages provide emotional and sexual satisfaction, as well as social and economic benefits. The poet's influence was also visible in the growing importance of personal attractiveness and romantic skill as forms of social capital that could be used to advance one's position in Roman society. Romans who mastered Ovid's techniques found that their enhanced attractiveness opened doors to social and economic opportunities that might otherwise have remained closed to them. But perhaps the most significant impact of Ovid's teachings was their contribution to the development of a distinctively Roman culture of romantic individualism that emphasized personal choice, emotional satisfaction, and aesthetic pleasure over traditional communal values of duty, sacrifice, and social conformity. The poet taught an entire generation to think of romantic relationships as private affairs governed by personal preference rather than public activities, subordinated to family and state interests. This romantic individualism created ongoing tensions with the imperial system's requirements for social order and political stability. Augustus and his successors found themselves constantly struggling to reconcile the cultural sophistication and personal freedoms that made Roman civilization attractive to educated elites with the social discipline and collective commitment necessary for maintaining an empire spanning 3 continents. The emperor's decision to exile Ovid represented an attempt to resolve these tensions by removing the most influential advocate for romantic individualism from Roman society. But the cultural changes that Ovid's teachings had inspired proved impossible to reverse through political action alone. The poet's influence continued to shape Roman approaches to love and seduction throughout the imperial period, creating a distinctive romantic culture that combined sophisticated psychological insight with persistent anxiety about the social and political consequences of uncontrolled desire. Even in his remote place of exile on the Black Sea, Ovid continued to influence Roman culture through his later works, which reflected on the relationship between personal fulfillment and social responsibility with a depth and complexity that his earlier celebrations of seduction had perhaps lacked. His Tristia and Epistulae ex Ponto revealed a more mature understanding of the costs associated with prioritizing personal desire over social obligation, while never abandoning his fundamental belief in the value and importance of romantic love as a source of human meaning and satisfaction. The ripples of Ovid's revolutionary teachings spread throughout the Roman Empire like slow waves across a vast sea, touching the lives of countless individuals who would never read his works directly, but who inherited the cultural transformations his ideas had set in motion. In the decades following his exile, Roman society grappled with the profound implications of understanding love and attraction as strategic arts rather than natural impulses, creating new forms of social complexity that would challenge traditional institutions and reshape the very foundations of imperial civilization. The immediate impact of Ovid's influence was most visible among the educated elites of Rome and other major cities, where his sophisticated approach to romance became integrated into the broader cultural curriculum that defined aristocratic sophistication. Young patricians who had never encountered financial hardship or physical danger found in the pursuit of romantic conquest an arena for competition and achievement that provided the kind of meaningful challenge their privileged positions otherwise lacked. These elite Romans developed increasingly elaborate approaches to courtship that treated seduction as a fine art requiring years of study and practice to master properly. They established informal schools and social circles dedicated to discussing and refining romantic techniques, sharing information about successful strategies, and analyzing the psychological dynamics that governed attraction between different types of people in various social contexts. The conversations that took place in these elite gathering places revealed how profoundly Ovid's teachings had altered Roman understanding of human relationships. Where traditional Roman discourse about love had focused primarily on duty, family honor, and social advantage, these new discussions treated romantic relationships as complex psychological puzzles that could be solved through careful observation, strategic thinking, and sophisticated emotional manipulation. Wealthy Romans began to invest significant resources in enhancing their romantic capabilities, hiring tutors to improve their conversational skills, musicians to teach them instruments that would make them more appealing to potential partners, and even philosophers to help them develop the kind of intellectual sophistication that Ovid had identified as essential to successful seduction. The pursuit of romantic expertise became a major component of elite education, rivaling traditional subjects like rhetoric, law, and military strategy in its importance to ambitious young Romans. This cultural shift had profound implications for Roman approaches to marriage and family formation among the upper classes, where previous generations had understood marriage primarily as a political and economic alliance between families. Romans influenced by Ovid began to expect that marriages would also provide emotional satisfaction, intellectual companionship, and sexual fulfillment. This change in expectations created new pressures on traditional arranged marriage systems and contributed to increasing rates of divorce and remarriage among elite Romans seeking partners who could meet their enhanced romantic standards. Influence of Ovid's teachings was not limited to the wealthy and educated, but gradually filtered down through Roman social hierarchies to affect the romantic behaviors and expectations of merchants, artisans, soldiers, and even slaves. The specific techniques that Ovid had developed for elite audiences were adapted and simplified to meet the needs and resources of Romans from different social backgrounds, creating a democratization of romantic sophistication that would have been unimaginable in earlier periods of Roman history. Soldiers returning from campaigns in distant provinces brought with them stories of romantic adventures that reflected their absorption of Ovidian principles, describing conquest of foreign women through strategic application of charm, gifts, and psychological manipulation rather than simple physical force. These military romantic narratives became popular entertainment in taverns and barracks throughout the empire, spreading Ovid's understanding of seduction as strategic activity to populations that had little direct contact with formal Roman literary culture. Merchants and traders who traveled the extensive commercial networks that connected Roman cities developed their own versions of Ovidian romantic technique, learning to adapt their approaches to attraction based on the cultural expectations and social norms of different regions and communities. These commercial travelers became inadvertent missionaries for Roman romantic culture, introducing Ovid's strategic approach to love into provincial communities that gradually incorporated these sophisticated techniques into their own traditional courtship practices. Even slaves, despite their limited legal and social autonomy, found ways to apply Ovidian principles to their own romantic relationships and to their interactions with free Romans who might be persuaded to provide special treatment, manumission, or other advantages in exchange for sophisticated romantic attention. The spread of strategic romantic thinking throughout all levels of Roman society created new forms of social mobility and new opportunities for advancement that operated parallel to traditional political and economic hierarchies. The cultural transformation, inspired by Ovid's teachings, also had significant implications for Roman religious and philosophical understanding of human nature and social organization. Traditional Roman religion had emphasized the subordination of individual desire to collective good, treating excessive attention to personal pleasure as a form of impiety that threatened the favor of the gods who protected the Roman state. Ovid's celebration of sophisticated pleasure-seeking challenged these religious foundations by suggesting that the cultivation of personal happiness and aesthetic refinement were worthy goals in themselves, independent of their contribution to collective welfare. This shift toward romantic individualism created tensions with traditional Roman philosophical schools, which had generally emphasized duty, self-discipline, and the subordination of emotion to reason as essential virtues for educated citizens. Stoic philosophers in particular found themselves struggling to respond to Ovidian romantic culture, which celebrated precisely the kinds of emotional sophistication and aesthetic sensitivity that Stoic teaching identified as sources of weakness and moral corruption. Some Roman philosophers attempted to develop new synthesis approaches that would reconcile Ovidian romantic sophistication with traditional philosophical commitments to virtue and social responsibility. These thinkers argued that the strategic study of love and attraction could serve larger moral purposes by developing emotional intelligence, social sensitivity, and psychological insight that would make individuals more effective citizens and better contributors to collective welfare. But other philosophers rejected Ovidian romantic culture entirely, arguing that its emphasis on pleasure, manipulation, and individual satisfaction represented a fundamental corruption of Roman values that would ultimately destroy the moral foundations necessary for imperial success. These critics pointed to increasing rates of divorce, declining birth rates among elite families, and growing social instability as evidence that Ovid's teachings were having destructive effects on Roman society. The debate between supporters and critics of Ovidian romantic culture became a central feature of Roman intellectual life throughout the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, contributing to broader discussions about the relationship between individual freedom and social order, between cultural sophistication and political stability, between personal fulfillment and collective responsibility. These philosophical and cultural tensions were reflected in the evolving policies of successive Roman emperors, who struggled to find appropriate responses to the social changes that Ovid's teachings had inspired. Some emperors, like Trajan and Hadrian, generally tolerated or even encouraged the cultural sophistication associated with strategic approaches to love and attraction, viewing romantic refinement as one of the achievements that distinguished Roman civilization from the simpler cultures of barbarian peoples. Other emperors, particularly those who came to power during periods of military crisis, or social instability, attempted to reverse Ovidian cultural influences by promoting traditional values, restricting literary expression, and implementing policies designed to encourage more conventional approaches to marriage and family formation. These periodic efforts at moral restoration generally proved ineffective. However, as the cultural changes inspired by Ovid's teachings had become too deeply embedded in Roman social practice to be eliminated through political action alone. The long-term impact of Ovidian Romantic culture was perhaps most visible in the gradual transformation of Roman literature, art, and entertainment throughout the imperial period. Poets, painters, sculptors, and performers increasingly focused on themes of love, attraction, and seduction, developing sophisticated aesthetic approaches to these subjects that reflected the influence of Ovid's strategic understanding of romantic relationships. Roman literature of the imperial period was filled with characters who applied Ovidian principles to their romantic pursuits, using psychological insight, strategic thinking, and sophisticated manipulation to achieve their desires. These literary works served both as entertainment and as informal education in romantic technique, spreading knowledge of advanced seduction strategies to readers throughout the empire who might not have access to formal instruction in such matters. Roman visual arts also reflected the influence of Ovidian romantic culture, with increasing attention to erotic themes, sophisticated treatments of beauty and desire, and complex explorations of the psychological dynamics that governed attraction between different types of people. Wealthy Romans commissioned frescoes, mosaics, and sculptures that celebrated romantic love and sexual pleasure with a sophistication and explicitness that would have shocked earlier generations but had become acceptable within the cultural framework that Ovid's teachings had established. The transformation of Roman entertainment was equally significant, with theatrical performances, gladiatorial games, and public festivals increasingly incorporating themes and narratives that reflected Ovidian understanding of love and seduction. These popular entertainments served as vehicles for transmitting romantic sophistication to mass audiences, ensuring that strategic approaches to attraction became part of the common cultural inheritance of ordinary Romans throughout the empire. Perhaps the most profound long-term consequence of Ovid's influence was the way his teachings contributed to the gradual individualization of Roman culture that would ultimately challenge the collective foundations upon which imperial authority rested. By teaching Romans to prioritize personal satisfaction and individual achievement in romantic relationships, Ovid had introduced principles that were difficult to reconcile with the subordination of private interest to public good that had traditionally characterized Roman civic virtue. This cultural individualization accelerated throughout the imperial period, contributing to the decline of traditional Roman religious practices, the weakening of family and clan loyalties, and the growing importance of personal choice and private preference in areas of life that had previously been governed by collective decision-making and social obligation. Deep beneath the bustling streets of modern Rome, in the carefully catalogued storage rooms of archaeological museums across Europe and North Africa, rest thousands of small, intimate objects that tell a story far more complex and mysterious than the grand narratives of imperial conquest and political achievement that have long dominated our understanding of Roman civilization. These are the secret weapons of Roman attraction: cosmetic containers still bearing traces of lead-based makeup, jewelry designed to enhance sexual appeal through both beauty and magic, and small lead tablets inscribed with desperate love spells that were buried in sacred places by Romans, whose passion had driven them to seek supernatural intervention in their romantic pursuits. The archaeological record of Roman attraction reveals a civilization obsessed not just with the strategic manipulation of desire that Ovid had celebrated in his poetry, but with the transformation of the human body through chemical enhancement, magical protection, and supernatural intervention. These material remains tell us that Romans approached attraction as both an art and the science, deploying sophisticated knowledge of chemistry, metallurgy, and religious practice in service of their romantic ambitions, dot in the dimly lit galleries of the British Museum. Visitors can examine small glass and ceramic containers that once held the cosmetic preparations that Roman women applied to their faces with a dedication and sophistication that would seem familiar to any modern beauty enthusiast. But analysis of the residues found in these ancient vessels reveals that Roman cosmetics contained ingredients that would horrify contemporary users, compounds of lead, mercury, and arsenic that promised to whiten skin, reduce wrinkles, and create the pale complexion that Roman society associated with aristocratic beauty and sexual desirability. The most popular of these dangerous beauty treatments was cerus, a white lid carbonate paste that women applied to their faces, necks, and arms to achieve the alabaster skin tone that marked them as wealthy enough to avoid outdoor labor and refined enough to meet the aesthetic standards of educated Roman society. The preparation and application of cerus was a complex process that required both chemical knowledge and artistic skill, as women had to mix the lead compounds with various binding agents and colorants to create cosmetics that would adhere properly to their skin while producing the desired visual effects. Archaeological evidence suggests that many Roman women understood that these lead-based cosmetics were potentially dangerous. Chemical analysis of ancient cosmetic containers reveals that wealthier women often used preparations with lower concentrations of toxic materials, while poorer women were more likely to use cosmetics with dangerous levels of lead and other poisonous substances. This suggests that access to safer beauty treatments was yet another marker of social distinction in Roman society. But even wealthy Roman women who could afford the safest available cosmetics were willing to accept significant health risks in pursuit of the enhanced attractiveness that these preparations promised. The archaeological record includes numerous examples of Roman women's graves that contain evidence of chronic lead poisoning, suggesting that the pursuit of beauty through chemical enhancement was so culturally important that women continued using dangerous cosmetics even when they understood the potential consequences. The complexity of Roman cosmetic practice extended far beyond simple skin whitening to include sophisticated techniques for enhancing eyes, lips, and hair that required specialized tools and extensive knowledge of color theory and chemical interaction. Archaeological sites throughout the former Roman Empire have yielded elaborate cosmetic kits containing dozens of different preparations, each designed for specific enhancement purposes and requiring particular application techniques. These cosmetic kits included kohl made from antimony and soot for darkening eyelashes and eyebrows, rouge made from red ochre and cinnabar for coloring cheeks and lips, and various hair dyes and treatments made from henna, saffron, and other plant materials that promised to transform ordinary brown or black Roman hair into the golden blonde locks that had become fashionable following military campaigns in Germania and Gaul. The archaeological evidence reveals that Roman men also participated extensively in cosmetic enhancement, though their beauty treatments were designed to project different qualities than those sought by women. Male cosmetics focused on creating impressions of health, vitality, and controlled strength rather than the delicate refinement that characterized female beauty ideals. Roman men used various preparations to enhance their complexions, but these were typically designed to create a healthy glow rather than the pale translucency that women sought. They applied oils and balms to their hair and beards, using preparations that promised to promote growth, enhance natural color, and create attractive scents that would make them more appealing to potential romantic partners. Archaeological sites have yielded numerous examples of male grooming tools that reveal the sophistication of Roman masculine beauty culture. Bronze razors with elaborately decorated handles, tweezers designed for precise hair removal, and small containers for holding the various oils and perfumes that men used to enhance their attractiveness. These objects suggest that Roman men invested considerable time, effort, and resources in cosmetic enhancement, challenging modern assumptions about ancient attitudes toward masculine vanity and self-presentation. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the archaeological record of Roman attraction is the evidence it provides for the widespread use of jewelry and amulets, designed to enhance sexual appeal through magical as well as aesthetic means. Roman goldsmiths and silversmiths created elaborate pieces that combined beautiful craftsmanship with religious symbolism and magical properties, producing jewelry that was intended to make the wearer more attractive through supernatural intervention, as well as visual enhancement. Many of these magical jewelry pieces featured explicit sexual imagery combined with religious symbols and inscriptions, designed to invoke the protection and assistance of various gods and goddesses associated with love, fertility, and sexual pleasure. Archaeological museums contain numerous examples of Roman rings, bracelets, and pendants decorated with images of Priapus, Venus, Cupid, and other deities whose favor was thought to enhance romantic success. Some of the most intriguing examples of magical attraction jewelry are the so-called erotic rings that have been found throughout the former Roman Empire. These rings feature detailed erotic scenes on their surfaces, often combined with inscriptions asking for divine assistance in romantic matters. The rings were typically worn on specific fingers according to complex astrological and magical beliefs about the relationship between different parts of the body and various planetary influences that governed romantic attraction. The archaeological record also includes numerous examples of magical amulets designed to be worn in intimate contact with the body, often suspended from chains that would position them near the heart or sexual organs. These amulets typically featured combinations of erotic imagery, religious symbols, and magical inscriptions that were believed to enhance the wearer's sexual attractiveness and romantic success through supernatural means. Analysis of these magical jewelry pieces reveals sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, gemology, and artistic technique that suggests they were created by highly skilled craftsmen who specialized in producing items for the luxury market. The expense and artistic quality of these pieces indicate that magical enhancement of sexual attractiveness was not a marginal practice confined to the superstitious poor, but a mainstream activity that attracted the attention and resources of wealthy and educated Romans. The most mysterious and haunting evidence for Roman approaches to attraction through supernatural intervention comes from the hundreds of lead, curse tablets that have been discovered at sacred sites throughout the former empire. These small metal sheets contain inscriptions in which desperate Romans petitioned various gods and spirits to intervene in their romantic lives, seeking divine assistance in securing the love of particular individuals who had proven resistant to more conventional forms of seduction. The language of these love spells reveals both the intensity of Roman romantic passion and the sophisticated theological and magical thinking that Romans applied to matters of the heart. The tablets typically begin with elaborate invocations of underworld deities, particularly Hecate, Hermes, and various spirits of the dead, who were believed to have the power to influence human emotions and desires from beyond the grave. Petitioners then provided detailed descriptions of their romantic targets, including physical descriptions, personal habits, and family connections that would help the invoked spirits identify and influence the correct individuals. These descriptions reveal intimate knowledge of the objects of Roman romantic obsession, suggesting that the love spells were typically written by people who had been observing and studying their desired partners with the kind of careful attention that Ovid had recommended in his treatises on strategic seduction. The actual requests contained in the love spells reveal the specific outcomes that Romans hoped to achieve through magical intervention in their romantic lives. Some tablets asked simply for the target's attention and interest, requesting that the spirits make particular individuals notice and desire the petitioners. Others sought more dramatic interventions, asking that the targets be driven to distraction. By overwhelming passion, unable to eat or sleep until they submitted to the petitioner's romantic demands. The practice of burying love spells and magical amulets was not random or haphazard, but followed a complex sacred geography that Romans had developed through centuries of experimentation with supernatural approaches to romantic enhancement. Archaeological evidence reveals that certain locations throughout the empire became renowned as particularly powerful sites for magical intervention in matters of love and attraction, drawing desperate romantics from across the Mediterranean world who sought to harness the spiritual energies that were believed to concentrate in these sacred places. The most powerful of these romantic, magical sites were typically associated with natural features that Romans understood as points of connection between the mortal world and the realm of the gods and spirits who controlled human emotions and desires. Underground springs, mysterious caves, unusual rock formations, and ancient trees were all believed to possess special properties that made them ideal locations for petitioning supernatural forces for assistance in romantic matters. The sacred spring at Bath in Britain provides a remarkable example of how Romans transformed natural sites into sophisticated centers for magical practice related to love and attraction. The hot springs that bubbled up from deep underground were understood as a direct connection to the underworld realm, where the spirits who controlled human passions were believed to reside. Roman engineers constructed elaborate temple complexes around these springs, creating formal sacred spaces where visitors could perform the ritual procedures necessary to petition the gods for romantic assistance. Archaeological excavations at Bath have revealed thousands of curse tablets and magical offerings that were thrown into the sacred waters by Romans seeking supernatural intervention in their love lives. The tablets contain detailed descriptions of romantic desires and sophisticated magical procedures that reveal how thoroughly Romans had integrated supernatural approaches to attraction into their broader understanding of romance and seduction. Many of the Bath curse tablets were written by women seeking to attract the attention of specific men who had proven resistant to conventional approaches to seduction. These tablets typically begin with elaborate invocations of Seduced Minerva, the Romano-British goddess who was believed to control the springs and their magical properties. The petitioners then provide detailed descriptions of their romantic targets and specific requests for divine intervention that reveal both the intensity of their desires and their sophisticated understanding of magical procedure. One particularly poignant tablet, discovered in the 1980s during excavation of the spring's sacred pool, was written by a woman named Vilbia, who sought the love of a man named Exuperius. Her petition to Seduced Minerva includes a detailed physical description of Exuperius, a list of his daily habits and favorite haunts, and a desperate plea that the goddess burn his heart with love until he surrendered to Vilbia's romantic desires. The tablet was accompanied by a small bronze figurine representing the desired romantic union and a lock of hair that chemical analysis has revealed came from Exuperius himself, suggesting that Vilbia had been observing and following her target. With considerable dedication and skill, similar magical practices were documented at sacred sites throughout the Roman Empire, each with its own particular specializations and supernatural authorities. The Oracle of Apollo at Delphi in Greece, while primarily known for political and military prophecies, also provided guidance on romantic matters to wealthy Romans who could afford the expensive journey and elaborate offerings required to consult the Pythia. The oracle's pronouncements on matters of love were typically cryptic and ambiguous, requiring careful interpretation by skilled priests who had developed sophisticated expertise in translating divine guidance into practical romantic advice. Temple of Venus at Paphos in Cyprus became a major pilgrimage destination for Romans seeking the goddess's assistance in romantic matters. The temple's priests had developed elaborate ritual procedures that promised to enhance visitors' attractiveness and romantic success through divine intervention. These rituals typically involved ritual bathing in sacred springs, anointing with specially blessed oils and perfumes, and the performance of sacred dronas that reenacted mythological stories of successful divine seductions. Archaeological evidence from Paphos reveals that the temple maintained extensive workshops where skilled craftsmen produced magical jewelry, amulets, and cosmetic preparations that were blessed by the priests and sold to pilgrims as supernatural aids to romantic success. Chemical analysis of cosmetic residues found at the site reveals that these temple-produced beauty treatments contained many of the same dangerous ingredients found in secular Roman cosmetics, but were enhanced with rare and expensive additives that were believed to possess special magical properties. The temple also maintained elaborate gardens where rare plants and herbs with supposed aphrodisiac properties were cultivated according to specific astronomical and ritual procedures. These botanical collections included exotic species imported from throughout the known world, mandrake roots from Asia Minor, Spanish fly from the western Mediterranean, and various spices and aromatics from India and Arabia that were believed to enhance sexual desire and romantic attraction. The priests of Venus had developed sophisticated knowledge of how to prepare and combine these botanical materials to create perfumes, incenses, and magical preparations that promised to make users irresistible to their desired romantic targets. The recipes for these preparations were closely guarded temple secrets, passed down through generations of priestly families who maintained their monopoly on the most powerful supernatural approaches to romantic enhancement. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Roman magical practice related to attraction was the use of necromantic procedures that sought to enlist the spirits of the dead in service of the living's romantic ambitions. Romans believed that the dead retained both knowledge of human affairs and the power to influence mortal emotions and desires, making them potentially valuable allies for those seeking supernatural assistance in matters of love and seduction. Archaeological record contains numerous examples of elaborate necromantic procedures that were performed at grave sites and tombs throughout the Roman Empire. These rituals typically involved the burial of love spells and magical offerings at the graves of individuals who were believed to possess particular expertise in nice romantic matters, famous courtesans, renowned lovers, or individuals who had died young while engaged in passionate love affairs. One of the most remarkable examples of Roman necromantic practice was discovered during excavations at a cemetery outside Rome in the 1990s. Archaeologists uncovered a series of elaborate magical deposits that had been buried at the grave of a woman named Plotina, who, according to her epitaph, had been renowned throughout the city for her beauty and romantic expertise before her death at the age of 23. The magical deposits at Plotina's grave included dozens of lead curse tablets written by both men and women seeking her posthumous assistance in their romantic pursuits. The tablets reveal that Plotina's reputation for romantic expertise had persisted after her death, with desperate lovers seeking her spiritual guidance and intervention in their affairs for decades following her burial. The language of these necromantic love spells reveals sophisticated theological thinking about the relationship between the living and the dead, and the ways in which spiritual intervention could influence mortal romantic relationships. The petitioners typically began their appeals by praising Plotina's legendary romantic skills and requesting that she use her posthumous powers to provide similar expertise to the living supplicants. Many of the tablets contain detailed descriptions of the petitioner's romantic problems and specific requests for the kinds of assistance that Plotina's spirit might provide. Some sought advice on seduction techniques and romantic strategy, while others requested direct supernatural intervention that would make their desired targets fall in love with them, regardless of conventional considerations of attractiveness or compatibility. The archaeological context of these necromantic deposits reveals that they were accompanied by elaborate ritual procedures that included specific timing based on lunar cycles and astronomical events, particular orientations based on the cardinal directions and sacred geography, and the inclusion of personal items in valuable offerings designed to secure Platina's spiritual cooperation. The intersection of Roman scientific knowledge and magical practice created a sophisticated understanding of attraction that combined empirical observation with supernatural belief in ways that would seem strange to modern sensibilities, but represented the cutting edge of ancient knowledge about human desire and its manipulation. Roman alchemists, physicians, and magical practitioners developed elaborate theories about the chemical and spiritual processes that governed romantic attraction, creating a comprehensive system of romantic enhancement that operated through careful manipulation of both physical and metaphysical forces. The Roman understanding of cosmetic chemistry was far more sophisticated than the simple application of dangerous lead compounds might suggest. Archaeological analysis of cosmetic laboratories throughout the empire reveals that Roman beauticians and alchemists had developed detailed knowledge of chemical interactions, color theory, and the physiological effects of various mineral and plant-based preparations on human skin and appearance. The workshops where Roman cosmetics were produced resembled sophisticated chemical laboratories, equipped with bronze distillation apparatus, ceramic crucibles for heating and mixing compounds, and elaborate systems of weights and measures for ensuring precise proportions in cosmetic recipes. The craftsmen who operated these facilities possessed detailed knowledge of metallurgy, mineralogy, and botanical chemistry that rivaled the expertise of contemporary physicians and natural philosophers. Roman cosmetic recipes, preserved in various medical and alchemical texts, reveal sophisticated understanding of how different chemical compounds could be combined to achieve specific visual and aromatic effects. The preparation of cerus, the white lead makeup that was so popular among Roman women, required precise knowledge of chemical reactions, proper heating procedures, and the addition of various stabilizing agents that would ensure the cosmetic maintained its color and consistency during storage and application. But Roman cosmetic chemistry went far beyond simple color enhancement to include elaborate preparations designed to alter the fundamental appearance and even the scent of human bodies in ways that would make users more attractive to potential romantic partners. These preparations included skin-lightening compounds made from mercury and arsenic, hair dyes created from complex combinations of metallic salts and plant extracts, and perfumes that combined dozens of exotic ingredients according to recipes that had been refined through generations of experimentation. The most sophisticated Roman cosmetic preparations were designed to create subtle but distinctive personal scents that would make the wearer memorable and attractive to potential romantic partners. These perfumes were not simply pleasant-smelling mixtures of aromatic materials, but carefully balanced chemical compositions that were believed to influence human emotions and desires through their interaction with the body's natural processes. Roman perfumers had developed detailed theories about the relationship between different scents and various emotional states, creating elaborate classification systems that matched particular aromatic compounds with specific romantic outcomes. They believed that certain combinations of floral, spice, and animal-derived scents could influence human behavior by affecting the balance of bodily humors and the flow of vital spirits that governed emotional responses. The creation of these sophisticated perfumes required extensive knowledge of chemistry, botany, and animal biology, as Roman perfumers sought to extract and concentrate the most potent aromatic compounds from sources throughout the known world. Their workshops contained elaborate distillation equipment for extracting essential oils from plants, specialized tools for processing animal-derived aromatics like musk and ambergris, and complex systems for aging and blending different scent components to achieve optimal effects. The expense and complexity of these perfume-making procedures meant that the most sophisticated scent preparations were available only to wealthy Romans who could afford the expensive ingredients and skilled labor required for their production. But the existence of these elaborate cosmetic technologies demonstrates how seriously Romans took the chemical enhancement of attraction and their willingness to invest significant resources in the scientific manipulation of human desire. Grooming. Medical knowledge also contributed to sophisticated understanding of the physiological processes that governed attraction and sexual desire. Roman physicians had developed detailed theories about the relationship between physical health, emotional state, and romantic appeal, creating comprehensive approaches to attraction enhancement that combined cosmetic treatment with dietary management, exercise regimens, and medical intervention. These medical approaches to romantic enhancement were based on sophisticated understanding of human anatomy and physiology that Roman physicians had developed through dissection of human cadavers and careful observation of living patients. They understood that attractiveness was not simply a matter of surface appearance, but involved complex interactions between physical health, emotional stability, and psychological confidence that could be influenced through various medical and therapeutic interventions. Roman physicians prescribed specific dietary regimens designed to enhance romantic appeal by improving skin tone, increasing energy levels, and creating the kind of physical vitality that Romans associated with sexual attractiveness. These diets typically emphasized foods that were believed to have aphrodisiac properties: oysters, figs, honey, and various exotic spices and herbs that were thought to stimulate sexual desire and improve reproductive health. The medical literature also contains detailed descriptions of exercise programs designed to enhance romantic appeal by improving physical fitness and creating the kind of controlled strength and graceful movement that Romans found attractive in both men and women. These exercise regimens were carefully calibrated to achieve optimal results without creating the kind of excessive muscular development that Romans associated with manual laborers rather than educated elites. Roman physicians also developed various medical treatments designed to address specific physical problems that might interfere with romantic success. These treatments included procedures for removing unwanted hair, therapies for improving complexion and reducing skin blemishes, and various interventions designed to enhance sexual performance and reproductive capacity. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Roman scientific approaches to attraction was the integration of medical and alchemical knowledge with magical and supernatural beliefs to create comprehensive theories about the fundamental nature of desire and its manipulation. Roman natural philosophers developed elaborate cosmological models that explained romantic attraction as the result of complex interactions between planetary influences, elemental forces, and spiritual energies that could be manipulated through proper understanding of natural and supernatural law. These theoretical frameworks combined careful empirical observation with sophisticated mathematical and astronomical calculation to create prediction systems that promised to identify optimal timing for romantic initiatives, explain the compatibility between different types of people, and provide guidance for enhancing attractiveness through alignment with favorable cosmic influences. Roman astrologers who specialized in romantic consultation had developed detailed charts and calculation systems that purported to analyze the planetary influences that governed individual romantic destinies. These astrological approaches to attraction combined sophisticated astronomical observation with elaborate symbolic interpretation to create personalized guidance for clients seeking to enhance their romantic success through cosmic alignment. In the marble halls of the Palatine Hill, where Rome's most powerful families maintained their sprawling ancestral estates, a different form of attraction held sway, one that operated according to rules so fundamentally different from those governing ordinary Romans that it might as well have belonged to an entirely separate civilization. Here, among the patrician elite who traced their bloodlines back to the legendary founders of the city, Attractiveness was not something that could be purchased with cosmetics or enhanced through magical intervention, but was instead inherent, quality that flowed directly from the possession of political power, social authority, and the kind of generational wealth that allowed entire families to shape the destiny of the empire. The morning routine of a patrician matron differed markedly from the careful cosmetic preparations that occupied lesser Roman women. While merchants' wives labored over their lead-based makeup and shopkeepers, daughters worried about the perfect arrangement of their hair. Women like Livia Drusilla, the Emperor Augustus's wife, understood that their attractiveness derived not from physical beauty, but from their ability to command respect, dispense patronage, and influence the political and social networks that determined success and failure throughout the Roman world. Livia's daily preparations focused not on enhancing her individual features, but on presenting herself as the embodiment of Roman aristocratic values and imperial authority. Her clothing was selected not for its ability to flatter her figure, but for its capacity to communicate her family's ancient dignity and her personal connection to imperial power. The fabrics were the finest available silk from China, linen from Egypt, wool from the most exclusive sources in Gaul, but they were chosen and arranged to project an image of controlled magnificence rather than sensual appeal. The jewelry that adorned Livia's person served a similar function, each piece carefully selected not for its beauty, but for its historical and political significance. The emerald necklace had belonged to Cleopatra before being claimed as spoils of war following the Battle of Actium. The gold bracelets bore inscriptions commemorating military victories won by her male relatives. The pearl earrings had been a diplomatic gift from a client king seeking to maintain favorable relations with Rome. Every ornament told a story of power, conquest, and political achievement that enhanced Livia's attractiveness far more effectively than any cosmetic enhancement could have done. The servants who attended Livia during her morning preparations were themselves carefully chosen to enhance her attractiveness through their demonstration of her household's wealth and efficiency. The slave who arranged her hair was a Greek woman renowned throughout Rome for her artistic skill, purchased at enormous expense from a Syrian merchant. The attendant who selected her clothing was a freedwoman whose family had served the Claudian clan for generations. Her loyalty and expertise representing the kind of generational stability that marked truly aristocratic households. But perhaps, most importantly, Livia's morning routine included extensive briefings from various agents and informants who kept her informed about the complex web of political relationships, social obligations, and economic opportunities that shaped elite Roman society. Her attractiveness depended not on her appearance, but on her knowledge, her understanding of who owed favors to whom, which families were rising and which were declining, what political developments might create new opportunities for advancement, or new threats to existing positions. This information was Livia's true cosmetic enhancement, more valuable than any lead-based makeup or magical amulet in making her an irresistibly attractive partner for the political and social alliances that determined success among the Roman elite. Men and women throughout the empire sought her attention not because they found her physically beautiful, but because they understood that her favor could advance careers, secure profitable contracts, and provide access to the networks of power that controlled every aspect of Roman civilization. The contrast between elite and ordinary approaches to attraction was perhaps most visible in the different ways that wealthy and poor Romans used their domestic spaces to enhance their romantic appeal. While middle-class families invested heavily in cosmetics, perfumes, and elaborate grooming rituals, patrician households focused their resources on creating environments that would demonstrate their occupants' power, taste, and cultural sophistication. The villa of a wealthy senator was designed not to showcase physical beauty, but to overwhelm visitors with displays of artistic achievement, intellectual refinement, and political authority that would make the owner irresistibly attractive as a potential ally, patron, or marriage partner. The entrance hall contained statues of distinguished ancestors, their marble faces bearing inscriptions detailing military victories, political offices, and civic achievements that established the family's credentials for leadership and authority. Reception rooms were filled with works of art that demonstrated both the owner's wealth and his cultural sophistication. Greek sculptures purchased from bankrupt cities, Egyptian artifacts acquired through diplomatic connections, paintings by renowned artists whose services had been secured through political influence. These artistic collections served as conversation pieces that allowed the host to display his knowledge of history, philosophy, and aesthetics, while simultaneously demonstrating his resources and connections. The library was perhaps the most important room in an elite Roman villa, as it provided the setting for the kind of intellectual discourse that patricians used to establish their attractiveness to potential partners and allies. The collection of scrolls and codices represented not just learning, but power, the ability to acquire rare texts, to support scholarly research, and to participate in the cultural conversations that shaped educated opinion throughout the empire. During social gatherings in these elite domestic spaces, attractiveness was performed through demonstrations of wit, knowledge, and social competence rather than through displays of physical beauty or romantic charm. The most attractive guests were those who could contribute meaningfully to discussions of literature, philosophy, and politics, who possessed information about current events and social developments, and who understood the complex etiquette that governed interactions among the Roman elite. Perhaps nowhere was the Roman understanding of attraction as fundamentally connected to power rather than beauty, more dramatically illustrated than in the remarkable romantic careers of some of the empire's most physically unprepossessing but politically successful figures. These men and women, who by conventional standards of physical attractiveness would have been considered grotesque or repulsive, nevertheless commanded passionate devotion and desperate desire from some of the most beautiful and accomplished people of their age, a phenomenon that reveals the true nature of Roman attraction with startling clarity. The Emperor Claudius provides perhaps the most famous example of how political power could transform physical disadvantage into overwhelming romantic appeal. Contemporary sources describe him as a man whose appearance was so unfortunate that it seemed almost comical. He drooled constantly due to a speech impediment. His head shook uncontrollably. His limbs were weak and unsteady, and his entire physical presence suggested disability and weakness, rather than the dignity and authority expected of Roman leadership. Yet this same physically unprepossessing man became the object of intense romantic competition among the most beautiful and accomplished women of the imperial court. His wife Messalina, who was renowned throughout Rome for her extraordinary beauty and sexual sophistication, pursued him with such desperate passion that she engaged in increasingly reckless and public affairs, apparently driven to distraction by her desire to maintain his attention and affection despite his obvious physical limitations. Even more remarkably, after Messalina's execution for treason, Claudius found himself the center of another intense romantic competition, this time between his niece Agrippina and several other elite women who sought to become his next wife. These women, who could have chosen among the most handsome and accomplished men in the empire, instead focused their romantic ambitions on a man whose physical appearance was so unfortunate that his own family had initially considered him unfit for public life. The key to understanding this apparent paradox lies in recognizing how completely Roman concepts of attractiveness were divorced from physical appearance and connected instead to the possession of power, authority, and the ability to control the destiny of others. Claudius, despite his physical disabilities, commanded the resources of the entire Roman Empire. His approval could elevate families to unprecedented heights of wealth and influence, while his displeasure could result in exile, confiscation of property, or even death. For ambitious Roman women, no amount of conventional masculine beauty could compare with this kind of fundamental power over their own and their families' futures. Claudius's physical limitations became irrelevant in the face of his capacity to grant or deny the political and economic opportunities that determined success and failure in Roman society. His ugliness was transformed into attractiveness by the simple fact that he possessed ultimate authority over the systems that governed Roman life. The phenomenon was not limited to emperors, but extended throughout the Roman political hierarchy, where men and women whose physical appearance was distinctly unprepossessing nevertheless attracted passionate romantic attention from partners who understood that political connection was far more valuable than conventional beauty. The letters and memoirs of elite Romans contain numerous references to romantic relationships between physically mismatched partners, where the less attractive individual possessed superior political or economic resources. One particularly striking example involved a senator named Marcus Crassus Frugi, who was described by contemporary sources as remarkably ugly, short, fat, balding, with a face scarred by childhood diseases and a voice that was harsh and unpleasant. Yet this same man became the center of a romantic scandal that fascinated Roman society for months, as two of the city's most celebrated beauties engaged in an increasingly public competition for his affections. The women involved were both renowned for their physical perfection, their cultural sophistication, and their ability to attract the romantic attention of any man they chose. Yet they focused their desires on Crassus Frugi, not despite his physical shortcomings, but because of the political and economic advantages that connection with him would provide. His position in the Senate, his extensive family connections, and his control over lucrative business enterprises made him irresistibly attractive despite his unfortunate appearance. The competition between these two women escalated to include elaborate gift-giving, public displays of affection, and increasingly desperate attempts to demonstrate their devotion to a man who, by conventional standards, should have been grateful for any romantic attention whatsoever. Instead, Crassus Frugi found himself in the enviable position of being able to choose between two of the most desirable women in Rome, his ugliness transformed into attractiveness by the simple possession of political and economic power. Transformation of conventional unattractiveness into romantic desirability through power was not limited to men, but also affected women whose political connections or family resources made them irresistibly appealing despite physical limitations. The historical record contains several examples of women who wielded significant behind-the-scenes political influence and found themselves pursued by handsome young men who understood that romantic connection with these powerful women could advance their careers more effectively than any amount of conventional romantic strategy. One such woman was Antonia Minor, the daughter of Mark Antony and sister-in-law of the Emperor Tiberius, who was described by contemporary sources as plain-featured and somewhat masculine in her bearing. Yet she commanded passionate devotion from a series of younger men who recognized that her political connections and personal influence with the imperial family made her one of the most valuable romantic prizes in Rome. The transformation of Roman approaches to attraction to the elevation of power over beauty reached its most sophisticated expression in the elaborate social rituals and architectural environments that elite families created to showcase their romantic desirability. These carefully orchestrated displays of wealth, authority, and cultural sophistication represented the pinnacle of Roman understanding that attraction could be manufactured through environmental manipulation and strategic presentation rather than relying on the accident of individual physical characteristics. The great villas of the Roman aristocracy were designed not simply as residences, but as comprehensive attraction machines, with every element of their construction and decoration calculated to enhance their owners' romantic appeal through demonstrations of power, taste, and resources. The approach to a patrician estate was carefully planned to create a sequence of impressions that would overwhelm visitors with evidence of the family's wealth and authority long before they encountered the actual inhabitants. The entrance gates were typically massive bronze or marble constructions decorated with military trophies, family coats of arms, and inscriptions celebrating the political achievements of previous generations. These monuments served not just as practical barriers, but as psychological preparation for visitors, establishing the atmosphere of power and achievement that would characterize every aspect of their experience within the estate. The gardens that surrounded elite Roman villas represented perhaps the most sophisticated form of environmental attraction enhancement ever developed by an ancient civilization. These landscapes were not natural spaces, but carefully constructed artistic environments that demonstrated their owners' ability to command both human and natural resources in service of aesthetic and romantic goals. The Garden of Lucullus on the Pincian Hill, for example, contained botanical specimens imported from throughout the known world, arranged according to complex symbolic programs that referenced classical mythology, contemporary political events, and the owner's personal achievements and aspirations. Visitors walking through these gardens encountered a continuously unfolding narrative of power, sophistication, and cultural refinement that made Lucullus irresistibly attractive as a potential ally or romantic partner, regardless of his individual physical characteristics. The water features that dominated these elite gardens served multiple functions in enhancing their owner's romantic appeal. The engineering expertise required to create elaborate fountain systems and artificial lakes demonstrated technical sophistication and financial resources, while the aesthetic effects of moving water created atmospheric conditions that enhanced conversation and social interaction. The sound of fountains provided acoustic privacy for intimate conversations, while the visual effects of reflected light and movement created a sensory environment that was conducive to the formation of romantic connections. But perhaps most importantly, the control over water resources that these features represented was itself a powerful form of attraction in a Mediterranean climate, where access to reliable water supplies was a fundamental determinant of survival and prosperity. Visitors who experienced the abundant water features of elite gardens were simultaneously enjoying aesthetic pleasure and witnessing demonstrations of their hosts' power to command the natural resources that less fortunate Romans struggled to obtain. The interior spaces of elite Roman villas were equally carefully designed to enhance their owners' romantic attractiveness through strategic deployment of art, architecture, and decorative programs that demonstrated cultural sophistication and political authority. The atrium, where visitors were first received, typically contained portrait statues of distinguished family members, their marble faces bearing inscriptions that detailed military victories, political offices, and civic achievements spanning multiple generations. These ancestral portraits served as visual arguments for the family's genetic fitness and historical importance, creating an atmosphere in which romantic connection with current family members appeared not just personally advantageous, but historically significant. Visitors understood that aligning themselves with such families meant participating in narratives of achievement and distinction that extended far beyond individual romantic satisfaction to encompass broader themes of social advancement and cultural continuity. The dining rooms where elite Romans entertained potential romantic partners were designed as theaters for the performance of sophisticated hospitality that would demonstrate the host's attractiveness through their mastery of complex social arts. The arrangement of couches, the selection of tableware, the planning of menus, and the coordination of entertainment all served to create experiences that would make guests recognize their hosts as uniquely valuable and desirable partners. The elaborate dinner parties that took place in these spaces represented the culmination of Roman elite approaches to attraction, where physical beauty became entirely subordinated to demonstrations of intellectual sophistication, political awareness, and social competence. The most attractive individuals at these gatherings were not necessarily the most physically beautiful, but those who demonstrated the greatest skill in navigating the complex conversational and social challenges that characterized elite romance. Entertainment. The topics of conversation at elite dinner parties were carefully chosen to allow hosts and favored guests to display their knowledge, connections, and cultural sophistication in ways that would enhance their romantic attractiveness to other participants. Discussions of recent political developments, literary controversies, philosophical debates, and artistic trends provided opportunities for individuals to demonstrate the kinds of intellectual and cultural capital that elite Romans found more attractive than conventional physical beauty. The entertainment provided at these gatherings served similar functions, with performances of music, poetry, and drama selected not simply for their aesthetic merit, but for their capacity to demonstrate the host's cultural sophistication and their access to the most talented artists and performers available. The ability to command high-quality entertainment was itself a form of attraction, as it revealed the resources and connections that made elite Romans valuable as romantic partners. The sexual culture that developed within these elite environments operated according to principles that were fundamentally different from those that governed romantic relationships among other social classes. While ordinary Romans increasingly sought relationships that would provide emotional satisfaction and physical pleasure, elite Romans continued to prioritize connections that would enhance their political and social positions, leading to the development of distinctive approaches to sexuality that emphasized strategic utility over personal gratification. The mistresses and lovers of elite Roman men were typically chosen not for their physical beauty, but for their political connections, their intelligence, and their ability to provide information and influence that would advance their partners' careers and family interests. These relationships often resembled political alliances more than romantic partnerships, with both parties understanding that their attraction to each other was based on mutual utility rather than emotional or physical compatibility. The marriages, arranged within elite Roman society, reflected these same priorities, with considerations of political advantage, economic benefit, and social status enhancement taking precedence over personal preference or romantic attraction. Parents evaluating potential matches for their children focused on family reputation, financial resources, political connections, and the potential for creating advantageous alliances that would benefit multiple generations. But this emphasis on practical considerations did not prevent elite Roman marriages from developing into genuine romantic relationships. Rather, it meant that attraction and intimacy were understood and expressed in fundamentally different ways than among other social classes. Elite couples learned to find each other attractive through their shared participation in political projects, their mutual contribution to family advancement, and their recognition of each other's capabilities and achievements. The correspondence between elite Roman couples reveals sophisticated emotional relationships that were built on foundations of mutual admiration, shared cultural interests, and collaborative pursuit of family and political goals. These marriages often developed into genuine partnerships where both spouses contributed their particular skills and resources to achieving common objectives that enhanced their attractiveness to the broader elite community. The children of elite families were educated from early childhood to understand and participate in these distinctive approaches to attraction and romantic relationship. They learned to evaluate potential partners according to criteria that emphasized capability, character, and social position rather than physical appearance or emotional appeal. They developed sophisticated understanding of the political and economic factors that determine successful marriages and the skills necessary to maintain the kind of relationships that would enhance their family's power and influence. This elite educational system created generational continuity in approaches to attraction that helped maintain the distinctive character of patrician romantic culture throughout the imperial period. While fashions in cosmetics, clothing, and personal presentation might change among the broader population, the fundamental principles that governed elite approaches to attractiveness, the emphasis on power, competence, and social position over physical beauty and emotional appeal, remained remarkably consistent across centuries of Roman history. The persistence of these alternative approaches to attraction among the Roman elite created ongoing tensions with the more democratized romantic culture that had developed among the broader population following the influence of writers like Ovid. While ordinary Romans increasingly expected romantic relationships to provide personal satisfaction and emotional fulfillment, elite families continued to prioritize political and economic considerations that often conflicted with individual romantic preferences. These tensions were particularly visible in cases where elite children sought to marry for love rather than strategic advantage, challenging family expectations and traditional approaches to aristocratic marriage. The resistance that such romantic choices typically encountered revealed how deeply the distinctive elite understanding of attraction was embedded in the social and political structures that maintained aristocratic power and influence. The cultural impact of elite approaches to attraction extended far beyond the immediate circle of aristocratic families to influence broader Roman attitudes toward the relationship between power and desirability. The spectacle of wealthy and powerful Romans commanding passionate devotion, despite physical limitations or unconventional appearance, served as a constant reminder that attraction was fundamentally about resources and authority rather than individual charm or beauty. This understanding of attraction as a function of power rather than personal characteristics had profound implications for Roman social mobility and the ways in which ambitious individuals sought to improve their romantic prospects. Rather than investing primarily in cosmetic enhancement or the development of seductive skills, ambitious Romans focused their efforts on acquiring the political connections, economic resources, and cultural sophistication that would make them attractive to elite partners who could advance their social position. As the gentle shadows of sleep begin to embrace you, carry with you the profound understanding that our journey through the landscapes of Roman attraction has revealed truths about human nature that transcend the boundaries of time and civilization. The Romans, in their systematic approach to desire and their sophisticated understanding of attraction as fundamentally about power rather than beauty, created insights into the human condition that continue to resonate through the centuries. Echoing in the deepest chambers of our contemporary hearts and minds, out in the quiet darkness of your modern bedroom, surrounded by the comfortable certainties of electric light and climate control, it may seem almost impossible to imagine a world where attraction was measured not by warmth of personality or kindness of spirit, but by the cold calculus of social advantage and political utility. Yet as you drift toward sleep, consider how much of what the Romans understood about desire remains embedded in our own approaches to love and partnership, hidden beneath layers of romantic ideology that obscure but do not eliminate the fundamental human drives that shaped Roman civilization. The morning rituals of cosmetic enhancement that occupied Roman men and women find their echoes in our own daily preparations, though we have replaced their dangerous lead-based cosmetics with safer, but equally sophisticated chemical preparations designed to transform our appearance according to contemporary standards of attractiveness. The Roman understanding that beauty could be manufactured through careful application of scientific knowledge persists in our modern cosmetic industry, which promises transformation and enhancement through products that differ from Roman preparations, more in their safety than in their fundamental purpose. The Roman integration of strategic thinking with romantic pursuit continues to influence contemporary approaches to dating and relationship formation, though we tend to disguise our calculations behind the language of compatibility and emotional connection. The sophisticated psychological insights that writers like Ovid developed into systematic approaches to seduction remain relevant to anyone seeking to understand the complex dynamics that govern attraction and desire in human relationships. Perhaps, most significantly, the Roman recognition that attraction is fundamentally about power and utility rather than individual charm or physical beauty continues to shape social relationships in ways that we rarely acknowledge explicitly, but that operate constantly beneath the surface of our romantic culture. The modern emphasis on career success, financial stability, and social status as measures of romantic desirability reflects the same basic understanding that the Romans expressed more directly, that attraction is ultimately about the ability to provide security, advancement, and access to resources that enhance the quality of life. The magical and supernatural approaches to romantic enhancement that Roman practitioners developed may seem quaint or superstitious to modern sensibilities, but they reveal a sophisticated understanding of the psychological dimensions of attraction that contemporary research in neuroscience and behavioral psychology has only begun to explore. The Roman recognition that desire could be influenced through environmental manipulation, timing, and the strategic deployment of sensory experiences anticipates much of what we now understand about the neurological and psychological processes that govern human romantic behavior.